Welcome everybody back to the CP stage. My name is Noah Oldham. I am a senior director for the Send Network team at the North American Mission Board. I also serve as the lead pastor of August Gate Church in the St. Louis area. And in this conversation this afternoon, we're going to be talking about planting churches everywhere for everyone. And to help me do that, we have a couple of men who need no introduction. First, we have Vance Pittman, the president of Send Network, and Julio Arriola, the director of Send Network SBTC. Gentlemen, welcome to the stage. Welcome to this conversation.
Thank you.
Honored to be here, Noah. Thanks for having us.
Well, as I said, we're talking about planting churches everywhere for everyone. And what that means is grabbing a hold of this idea that planting churches is for everyone. That we need churches all over our convention of churches willing to be sending churches. Vance, let's start with you. Now, you planted and pastored Hope Church for over 21 years. Tell us a little bit about your sending church experience.
Yeah, no, it's a great question because at the end of the day, he made it. We need to introduce Dr. Kevin Ezell, the man, the myth, the legend is here. But to answer the question, when we planted our church in Las Vegas, we knew convictionally that at the end of the day, planting churches was not the goal. The goal is the kingdom of God being expanded in cities and nations all over the world. And one church cannot do that by themselves. One church can't accomplish the mission alone. So we need each other. The only way to accomplish the mission is through multiplying the church. So we created a culture from the very beginning that knew that the local church existed to introduce people to King Jesus, disciple them in kingdom living, and then send them out for the expansion of God's kingdom locally and globally. We would even joke in our membership process and say things like, if you join this church, we're going to do everything we can to talk you into leaving, because we knew that we had to be about sending. And so our church got to, over the course of 21 years, be a part of planting 80 churches out of our fellowship, sent out over 400 people up and down the West Coast, all in the Mountain and Pacific time zone, to join in God's activity of multiplying the church. But it was born out of a conviction that one church can't accomplish the mission by itself. We must multiply the church.
Man, that's amazing. Kevin Ezell, the president of the North American Mission Board, thank you for joining us. Hey, to you, we are so thankful for churches like Hope Church. Right. But is that the only size church that can get involved in the sending and multiplying church game? What have you seen over the last 11 years?
Yeah, I love you when you answer that. My very first church I pastored has 7 people in it. They voted me in 7-0. My only unanimous call, all right? That we want to set up Send Network so that any church anywhere can participate. There's absolutely no reason for any church in the SBC to not be a part of Send Network. At least just praying. And I say just praying. To pray, it all starts with prayer. Yeah. But every church can pray. And what I've loved to see churches like in Texas who adopt Salt Lake City. And all their deacons, they sent me a picture of one of their deacon of their elder meetings and had Utah Jazz, swag on, because it was just a reminder to pray for Utah and how they've just been all in. So the beautiful thing about the SBC and how we set this up is that every church, we're planting churches everywhere for everyone, but every church in the SBC can be a part of that process by prayer.
No, I want to ping off that, and here's a lyric that I use a lot. It's not the size of the church that determines its significance. It's the size of the mission. And all of us have been given the same mission, and it's the mission of taking the gospel to the ends of the earth. So it doesn't matter if your church is 50 people or 50,000 people. We've all been invited into a very big mission. And no matter your size, everyone can get involved in multiplying the church.
That's so good. We want to plant churches everywhere for everyone. And I think that necessitates planting churches in every context across North America. And that means we need to have churches from every context multiplying and sending into their context. Julio, how have you seen that be a reality in the great state of Texas, planting churches into every context of that state?
Man, what is happening in Texas is going around the whole nation. Because right now in Texas, we have 30 million people, and 20 million of those are lost. And think about this, half of those lost people are Hispanics. So half of those lost people are Hispanics. And now, when you look at the whole population, Texas is becoming like California. You have California, you have more Hispanics than any other group, but in Texas, we are very diverse. It's not only about Hispanics, it's not only about Anglos. I mean, we have 11% African American, 39% Anglos, 39% Hispanics. And if we want to reach the nations, and if we want to reach America, we need to look at diversity. You know, the beauty of this country is that we're a melting pot. We need to think about a church that looks beyond one ethnicity or one language. We need to go and reach Asians. We need to go and reach African Americans. When we say we are a network of churches, planting churches everywhere for everyone, we not only to be thinking about a location or different locations, we need to be thinking about different ethnicities. So what we're saying in Texas is, for example, in the last 5 years, we saw that we planted 37% of those church plants that we had were ethnic churches. And it's happening there, and it will be happening all around the nation.
That's amazing. Vance, what are the different categories for involvement in church planting? If a church is just getting started, what does that look like? And then what can they grow into as they continue?
Yeah, maybe you're listening to this or watching online and you're thinking, okay, that sounds great. I hear Julio, Kevin, and Vance talking about church planting, but we've never done that. How do we get involved? And there are multiple layers and ways that you can get involved in joining in God's activity of multiplying the church. First of all, you can become what's just called a supporting church. A supporting church is just getting involved kind of at level one, where you send some money, you send some teams, or you pray. You just join in God's activity by praying for planters and cities and teams that are on the field. So it's just coming around. Every church that was planted in the New Testament was planted by a collaborative effort of New Testament churches working together and multiply the church. The church at Antioch sometimes was the sending church. Church at Jerusalem was the sending church. But often you would read that the churches of Macedonia were working together to see those churches planted. And that's what supporting churches are. They come around what would be the next tier, that is a sending church, and join in God's activity of multiplying the church by supporting a sending church and planting a church. But maybe you've already been a supporting church a few times and you're ready to become a sending church. A sending church is the church that holds the ropes. They own the responsibility. Convictionally, we believe that churches plant churches. Individuals don't, networks don't, denominations don't. Churches plant churches. Living things reproduce themselves. An ascending church is the church that owns the responsibility. They're holding the ropes to send out the planter and the team, and they're planting that church. I had a sending church when I went to Las Vegas 21 years ago. And I've said it this way many times. That sending church, if I'd gotten to Las Vegas, gotten the bubonic plague and died, they would have sent somebody else because they were planting that church. That's what a sending church is. Supporting churches come around a sending church that owns the responsibility. But then there's the next tier, that's a multiplying church. That's a church that is a supporting church and a sending church, but it also has a process within that fellowship, a residency, a cohort, where they are raising up planters and discipling planters to be sent out of their church. So no matter where you are on the spectrum, you can join in a family of churches, planting churches everywhere for everyone at some level. And at Send Network, we're in the process of building a pathway to walk with local churches. I mean, think about it this way. We have 47,000 churches in the SBC. We currently have about 4,400 of those churches involved with us at Send Network. If we could double that to 9,000 or 10,000 or 15,000 of our churches involved, and those churches were raising up planters every 2 or 3 years, we're talking about going from planting 600-700 churches a year to planting 2,000-3,000 new churches a year in North America. But it's going to happen as you lead your churches to get involved as supporting, sending, and multiplying churches.
Man, that's so good. So you said it. We don't plant churches. Send Network doesn't plant churches. Networks don't plant churches. Churches plant churches. So sending churches are so important. I'd love to hear from all three of you on this. What are some of the essential elements of a sending church? Starting with you, Kevin. What are some of the essential elements a sending church has to have within them?
Well, I think it starts with the pastor. If the pastor doesn't have a heart, we've seen it before. A church may be a sending church, but if a pastor come in and doesn't have the heart to reproduce and plant, then it seems to fade and ultimately evaporate. And so you really have to have a pastor who has a missions heart and understands multiplication and the importance of establishing a pipeline for those planters. We often get asked, why don't you plant more African American churches? Why don't you plant more Korean churches? Why don't you plant more? So we will. You just got to send us the planters. We don't have a basement at NAM where we store these planters. I mean, you have to send us planters, but it all starts with a pastor is the one key to have a sitting church.
And another thing that we need to be thinking about our churches that plant churches. Usually, those churches are deep rooted in prayer. They're like strategic in praying, and every year they dedicate time to pray for planters, pray for specific cities, specific countries. So I would say that those churches that are deep rooted in prayer, not only that we know that they need to share the word of God and share the gospel and have vision for the nations, but man, prayer. I have found a lot of those churches that are strategic in praying, that they go and plant more churches.
Yeah, I would answer it, Noah, by saying they need to be in three categories. Ascending church, first of all, needs to be about coaching. They need to be about coaching and helping that planter, number one, determine they've been called of God to do this, because the call of God to plant is everything. You and I are both planters. I would have quit 1,000 times if I could, but God called me. You can't stop what you didn't start. You have to finish what he called you to do. So the sending church helps the planter to assess that call and then helps to prepare them. There's a training process to walk with them in developing skills. And then there's the commissioning aspect, where the church celebrates sending out that planter and the team. What gets celebrated gets done. And we have an opportunity in a local church to celebrate this activity of God, multiplying the church, expanding his kingdom. And so commissioning and then caring for that planter and the team once they're on the field. One of the reasons, and you guys know this, a lot of church plants don't make it, is the planter and the team begin to feel all alone. They feel like nobody remembers us. We've been forgotten. And the sending church holding the ropes and caring for that planter through gifts, through prayers like Julio was talking about, through coaching, providing counsel to answer questions, all of those things are responsibilities of the sending church that's holding the rope.
Yeah, I'd say one more thing. Just as a sending church, we planted in 2009, and we've planted 6 churches since then. Sometimes you have to be willing to just take a risk. You have to be willing to say, we're going to pull the trigger and we're going to do it. There's always going to be something else to spend the money on, to put the people toward. But if you are committed to the Great Commission and multiplying your church, Acts chapter 11 shows us that. It said that they were scattered because of persecution, sharing only with the Jews. But then some people went to Antioch and were willing to share with the Gentiles also. And when they did, the church was birthed in Antioch.
And having the example of Acts 13, willing to lose your best people. Man, willing to lose your best people. When you realize that you're going to be a multiplying church by doing that, I mean, you have to sacrifice. And it's hard, but man, if you do that, we will have more churches.
One of the leaders in our church happens to work for Chick-fil-A. And when we were in the process of taking the steps out of our church, some of our leaders to join this role with Send Network, his response to it was this. He said, I'm in a business where we have a lot of turnover. And he said, I've had to learn you either lose people or you launch people.
There you go.
And he said, this is a moment to launch people. And we have to change that mindset. When we're sending people out, we're not losing people.
Amen.
We're launching people. The church exists to disciple them in kingdom living and send them out for the expansion of the kingdom to the ends of the earth. And we have to have that launching mindset.
Kevin, you've been at North American Mission Board now for a little over 11 years. What percentage of churches are involved right now in the work of church planting, and how have you seen that grow from when you started?
Yeah, right now it depends on, we talk about how many churches there are in the Southern Baptist Convention. We're not in charge of that, but I mean, who knows? But we think roughly it's right at 10%. It's very close. When we started, we had less than 1% of churches that were, and our goal was to get to 10% in 10 years. And so we were able to get to that goal. But again, to have it on their mindset. That's why it starts with prayer, participate, provide, just to do something. There's not one pastor that's at the convention or watching this online that cannot lead their church. It's set up so my little church of 7, at Hilltop Baptist Church in Fort Worth, Texas, can be a part. We are a part in the cooperative program through Annie Armstrong, but to be a very strategic, direct partner with these churches, it's so critical. But we're at 10%. The way we look at that, we have a great opportunity. There are 90% of the churches that are not currently engaged the way they need to be.
Vance, you recently came to the helm of Send Network as the president. You're envisioning what God has for the future. How do you envision that changing over the next 5 years?
Yeah, like Kevin said, we're at about 10% right now. And we're already seeing record numbers of churches planted. God's doing incredible things. But 10% is just a starting point. What if we could double that, get to 20 or 30% of the SBC family? And the reality is that since 2010, we've already planted over 9,400 churches. But by 2030, I think the statistic, Kevin, is that by 2030, 1/3 of all the churches in the SBC will have been planted since 2010. So what we're really talking about is important because we all believe in the cooperative program. We believe that we are better together. And what we're doing is we're being given the responsibility to steward what is the future of that cooperative program. If we're talking about 1/3 of the churches of the Southern Baptist Convention, and you go 10 years further, and we're talking half of the churches in the SBC. So this is a very important conversation, but I think it's one of the reasons why this is such a great day to be a Southern Baptist. We're involved in the greatest kingdom investment for the dollar that you can possibly get, and I really do believe great days are in front of us.
Right. I just want to add, when you say that number often, 10%, they're like, my word, 10%, that's not. What they don't realize is 9,000 churches in the SBC, roughly 20% of the SBC, give 90% of the cooperative program. 90% of Lottie Moon and 90% of Annie Armstrong. 9,000 churches. So if we're at 4,500, roughly 4,500, that's about half of the ones that are actually engaged. And so it's much better than it might sound compared to the whole. But in the bottom line is we have a lot of churches that aren't doing anything. Church planting, international missions, nothing. They're not baptizing in the shadow of their own steeple. And so this is a way to help paddle shock your church to be more missions minded.
And what he's telling me is there's a chance. We
Yeah.
can go
So
get
you're
the other
saying there's a
4,500
chance.
and let's go get them and get them involved. That's what I'm hearing.
That's it. That's it.
And I think we need to create awareness of the situation that we have around the world. And when we go to associations and we go to state conventions and we share the news, there's some good news. We need to go and share the gospel, but also that we need more participation of our churches. And we bring the stats and we bring the vision. I think we're setting the path for a great future.
I love that. Last question. I'd love to hear from each of you on this. What is one thing you want pastors and church members of our convention of churches to know about our cooperative work of planting churches everywhere for everyone? One thing you want them to hear.
Our churches, we plant Southern Baptist churches. That our planters sign off on the Baptist faith and message. And they're very committed to reaching people for the gospel. It's all about the gospel. So the one thing is, we feel like our planters are laser focused on, it's all about the gospel. And they want to be a part of our family, the Send Network family. And that's really code for SBC. It's just not helpful in Canada, Northeast, Midwest, West to say that. But the Send Network is the family, and we're focused on reproducing in a very rapid way.
Yes. No, and I think we just need to make sure that everyone, all pastors, everyone in our community knows that we are here to plant churches for everyone. Every ethnicity, every group, everyone.
And I'd just say what we've already said, that Send Network doesn't plant churches. Churches plant churches. We exist to serve and come alongside the local church in accomplishing the greatest mission the world has ever seen, and that's the Great Commission of Jesus.
Love it. Well, thank you, everyone, for joining us for this conversation on planting churches everywhere for everyone. We hope that you were inspired, but more than that, we hope that you will take your next step in becoming a multiplying, ascending, a supporting church, joining us on this mission together. Thank you.